Welcome to the Strategic Veteran, where we chart the course from service to civilian triumph. I'm Adam Peters, a veteran, entrepreneur, and your fellow navigator in the quest for a life of impact and fulfillment. My mission is simple: to empower you with the tools and stories that turn challenge into opportunity. Having walked the path from active duty to where I stand now, I understand the search for purpose that comes with hanging up the uniform. It's a path I've walked, with its trials, its tribulations, and its victories, and it's a journey we're on together. This podcast is more than just conversation. It's a beacon for those seeking to redefine our missions through entrepreneurship. It's about igniting the entrepreneurial spirit that lives within us, the spirit that compels us to create, lead, and make our mark on the world. Here we connect with veterans who have built businesses, sparked change, and found their purpose in the marketplace of ideas. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. They've transformed their service into startups, their experiences into enterprises, and they're proof that you can too. So whether you're scribbling business plans on napkins or stepping into the arena of innovation, remember, you're not alone. You're in good company. So let's explore these stories of transformation and take the first steps together on our path to purpose. Let's begin. Welcome to the Strategic Veteran Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Peters, and we're so excited to have you join us today. Our mission is to explore the journey of veterans who have served our country with distinction and inspired resilience and growth through their transitions into civilian life. Today's guest truly embodies these themes. It's an honor to introduce Douglas Katz, a West Point graduate, disabled Army veteran, and innovative entrepreneur driven by a mission, helping people retain their independence through adaptive products. After serving as a captain in the United States Army from 93 to 98 during a relatively peaceful stretch of the United States military history, Douglas faced moments that shaped his career and personal ethos. One experience stands out. He was the last functional fire support officer to call in indirect fire for his brigade during a high-pressure training exercise at the National Training Center. It wasn't actual combat, but it taught him a powerful lesson about resilience, grit, and never growing up. All principles that have carried through his post-military service. Douglas transitioned out of the military and entered the corporate world, a journey marked by triumphs and challenges, despite chasing the traditional career security path early. He soon discovered his true passion, innovation. His desire for entrepreneurial freedom and a commitment to adaptive technology led him to found Nulu, an exciting company developing products like the Nulu Knife, a tool specifically designed for individuals with physical limitations. Douglas's work is more than a business. It's a mission deeply inspired by his struggles and caretaker role. His unwavering belief in fostering dignity and confidence for others drives Nulu's groundbreaking innovations. In this episode, Douglas will open up about his journey of self-discovery, the lessons he learned transitioning from military to civilian life, and how he found purpose in serving a new community through entrepreneurship. He'll also share candid reflections on the power of following your passion, even when the road is uncertain, something that every veteran or transitioning service member can relate to. So whether you're seeking inspiration, actionable advice, or a fresh perspective on resilience and growth, you're going to want to stick around. Get ready for an authentic and empowering conversation that has the potential to reshape how you navigate your own path forward. Doug, welcome to the show, my man.
Wow, that was an amazing introduction. I'm sorry if the info I provided you was too much. I was like, is this me? Because I don't know if that's me, but no.
Well, this is you, man. This is all you, dude. And it's my pleasure to introduce you that way because it sets the stage for who you are and what they're going to learn about you and what they can learn from you. So with that being said, man, first question for everybody that's a veteran: where did you grow up and what inspired you to join the military?
I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, but my growing up hometown, East Grand Rapids, Michigan, home of the Pioneers. And it was a great place to grow up. And I knew I wanted to, it was like the Reagan era, right? Like it was Red Dawn, all that kind of stuff. They've been showing Red Dawn on Pluto TV again. And I'm like, that was kind of it, right? It was this, I don't want to say nationalism, but there was sort of a patriotism that was beginning to percolate. And I think recognition of our Vietnam veterans, you know, it was same time Platoon and Full Metal Jacket, like all that came out, and you know, a realization of, you know, one, how badly we treated some of our vets, and how that needed to change, but two, how service shapes the person. And you know, you study history and you look at the great leaders, both in the military and in corporate America and public service and government. A lot of times it's heavily populated, heavily concentrated with military people. And I wanted to be part of that. And I think that having been I did multiple sports in high school, football, wrestling, track, and lacrosse. And I think that athleticism draws people to the military, right? It's a very physical thing. So I was all set to go. I had an ROTC scholarship actually to the Marines. It was an ROTC scholarship to wherever I wanted to go. I was going to go to Michigan, but it was I would have become a Marine. And my guidance counselor was like, "Well, have you heard about the service academies?" And I'm like, "I know nothing about it." I'm like, understand, no one in my family served. My grandfather was a civilian contractor during World War II. He was a plumber on submarines, but no one else had served. So I was kind of an anomaly. And as a result, I didn't have the support structure say, do that, don't do that. Here's what you want to do. So she exposed me to the academies. And I was dead set. I wanted to be a Marine. So I went to the Naval Academy summer session, and I was all set. I wanted to go. I did all the interviews with the congressman and all that. And my congressman, Paul Henry, great guy. He died of cancer, but was an amazing guy. And from what I understand, I sent him a West Point hat, and he wore it in the hospital. So it was awesome. But then I ended up getting appointed to West Point, and that was it. So sorry, a little bit of a long story, but
No, and I'm always curious. So with the guidance counselor pushing you towards the service academies, did you realize it was going to be 4 years of military before the military?
I did because I was going to go ROTC. I expected it, and it was crazy because the first time I saw West Point in person was on the bus going through the gate, because I had never visited there. I thought I was going to get into the Naval Academy, and I think actually it served me well going to West Point because I like the people aspect of leadership. So for me, you're not guaranteed to go bulldog at Navy. And I do have to say to Navy, congratulations on the win this year.
Yeah,
Uh, you know,
you could
it was
suck it
tough. It was tough,
because
but Army had an amazing season. So I definitely shout out to the Army football team. They did amazing. But for me, it was about leadership. It was about sort of that pure leadership of people. A ship, it seems like always is kind of like a thing that people are supporting, right? They're all sort of parts of the body making it go. And the Army is sort of like you're in these uncertain environments and having to do all these things. And I think going full circle, I think I got out of the Army too early, but two, I think I found the same joy and excitement and dopamine rushes and everything doing the entrepreneurial thing, because it is far more like the military. People look, it's very interesting, right? And you're not, because people look and they're like, oh, the military, it's bureaucratic, you can't have autonomy, all this. And you look at corporate America and it's 10 times worse. And then you get in an entrepreneurial world and you're like, this is what I understand. People dedicated to a mission. They're not asking how much they're getting paid first. It's how are we going to solve the problem? It's that same rush. And I've been fortunate enough to take advantage of a lot of the entrepreneurial resources for veterans. And one thing I hope anybody listening to the show who wants to be an entrepreneur, find the military resources, the veteran resources, because there is some amazing stuff out there that can help you and not have to do it alone.
yeah, I'm super excited for 2025 coming up. I'm on the short list for the EBV through University of Syracuse and IVMF. So really
I went
excited.
through that.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
I'm really hoping I get picked up for it. I've done most of the things on their little checklist and kind of above and beyond to make myself more competitive, because you're right. The reason I have this podcast, and it's evolving, and I'm not afraid to admit that, but I started this with the idea that the path back to purpose for veterans was through entrepreneurship, because I really believe that. I also believe that not everybody's cut out to be an entrepreneur, right? Like I think you'll agree to that. But I do think that more veterans are more qualified than they even give themselves credit for to go out and pursue something that's their own and not be stuck in corporate America. And I actually agree with you. I think you're absolutely right. Entrepreneurship is so much more like the military because you're operating in chaos all the time. You never have a clue what's next. You never have a clue what you're doing, largely operating uninformed and having to make, off the cuff split second decisions that, I don't know, change the whole scope of what you're doing. And it's such a blast, man. It's so rewarding to get to learn new things every single minute of every single day. And so I'm so glad that you brought that up. And I'm curious, again, West Point is 4 years of military before the military. I've had a few West Pointers on here. My first episode with Rich Mulder, he was blown away at he kind of regretted his decision by going to West Point because it was 4 years of military before the military. But I'm really curious, how did West Point, how do you think it shaped your mindset? And how do you think it shaped your mindset maybe more than somebody like me who just had the basic training, enlisted experience out of high school versus college? Because I've never really asked that question before.
I think if I were to summarize it, it's West Point is as much a leadership school as a military school. And it's very interesting for me because my daughter's at the Coast Guard Academy right now. And we have a lot of similarities. And because her experience 30 years after I went to West Point is you can pick up the cell phone, she calls me and we talk about questions. And I realize that's the difference. It's this aspect of, and it's not just leadership, it's the concept of servant leadership. It's that you are there for your people and you succeed in their agency as much as your own. And it's not, you always say it's your platoon or your company or whatever, but you're just borrowing it. And it's never about that, right? And that's where it's so much like entrepreneurialism, where, it's this thing where if you're asking people to go with you on some kind of crazy journey, some of these entrepreneurial endeavors and enterprises aren't unlike somebody saying, hey, I'm going to go sail to the new world. And somebody's like, all right, there are plenty of people who say the world's flat, and there are plenty who say, I'm going to join you on this adventure. But along that way, it's about leadership. And I think that's the big part of it. Everything that you do from the first day when you walk out of your room and your roommate, his shirt's all messed up, and the guy pulls you aside and says, or the person, actually, guy or gal, pulls you aside and says, why is his shirt messed up? And you're like, I don't know. And they're like, it's your fault. You didn't check him and he didn't check you. And then at the next level, where let's say you're the sophomores at West Point are called yearlings, and you have like your one or two people you're in charge of. Well, if they get in trouble, you get in trouble first. Why did they not know what to do? That kind of leadership is unique. It shouldn't be, but it is, right? It's interesting when we were talking a couple of minutes ago about entrepreneurialism, the stress level that I feel in a world of uncertainty is far lower than worrying about who's gonna stab you in the back.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more on that. It's so strange how it works because you think taking such a big risk to go do something that you largely have no idea you don't have an idea what you're doing when you become an entrepreneur, because it's this constant journey of learning. And the only way to learn those things is to take that journey, to take those first steps and commit to becoming an entrepreneur, having a vision and building your vision essentially. And you would think that would come with so much more stress, but it's actually like my stress level is lower than it's ever been most of the time. Of the time, right?
And I think part of it is like even in training, right? The example that you gave, National Training Center, but people die there often, right? Like I remember an NCO saying to me once, we were standing next to a tank, and he's like, that's meant to kill. It doesn't care who it kills. So it wasn't equally dangerous as combat, but it was a dangerous place. And I think going there and in all those kind of situations and being like, okay, I have to make a decision. So I have to assess risk. And fundamentally, whether it's simulated or real, there are real outcomes. And if I don't assess risk the right way, not deciding can be a bad decision as well. And I think then you get in the real world and you're like, these are easy decisions. These are risks that you can come back from. But then you get in corporate America and it's so stratified. And the people above you may only be worried about not losing their jobs so that they can pay their kids' college bills or do whatever they got to do. And then you're sitting there going, okay, well, I guess I get how this works. I can't tell you the amount of times that people, peer leaders in corporate America, couldn't understand how I would, to the detriment of my career progression, manage down and take care of my people. It was crazy. So I think that drove me to lending, which is entrepreneurial, but it's still not the same. And it's funny, like when I'm saying the Army being a little bit different, where it's like, is it not your platoon? But it kind of is in terms of what you're expected to do, right? Like if you're out there, like I had a fire support team, you're kind of out, no one's saying you got to do this, you got to, right? You're doing everything and you're just expected to do the job, do the right thing, do it honorably, do it with character. And I think that now when you say you're happier than you've ever been, I feel the same way. I've lost weight. I see people that are like, well, what are you doing? Like, again, I haven't made a dime with the Nulu yet. I mean, if you count our Kickstarter, we made money. But it's one of those things where I think that military guys and gals, like military veterans, also understand the view of a strategy, of a strategic win or a tactical win, or how that works, right? So a bad decision is a loss of a skirmish or a battle or whatever. But you know how that strategy works. And what are military people great at? Looking and saying, how was that a bad decision? And how do we have to adjust? And I've built my team. Some of my team are not veterans, but a good number of the core team is. And it's one of those things where you just get them together and it's just like, boom, you know exactly how to do it all.
Yeah, and it falls back on three big skills. I call them high leverage skills that everything you just talked about, the discipline to show up every day, the adaptability and the resiliency piece of it, right? All of those things work together to move us forward in building whatever we're going to build. And you can apply those same three things to climbing the corporate ladder if you're willing to get out of your own ego. And when you get out, start at the bottom, because here's the deal: you are more than qualified to lead at that company, but you don't know how that company works. And you can't be an effective leader until you spend some time at the bottom to learn how the company works. And I actually was just having a conversation before we started recording with another veteran who sees the thing the way we see the thing. And we were just talking about this. It's like, I'm guilty of it. When I got out, I didn't want to pay dues. I didn't want to start at the bottom. I didn't want to climb that ladder. And so you got a choice. Either you accept that you're going to have to start at the bottom and you're going to fast track yourself. If you're as good as you think you are, you're going to climb that ladder really quick. Or you have to take the risk on yourself and build something like you and I are building. And
Oh, yeah.
those are really your only two choices. And those two choices, you can make them far less painful on yourself by listening to what we're talking about right now. You know what I mean?
Well, and even beside that, I'm sorry I cut you off,
No,
but
you're
like
great.
my I've got total ADD, so I'm
This
so
is
sorry
great,
about it.
man.
But there was an article that I had read years ago about sort of like corporate America and how the whole agreements changed. So when I got out in '98, it was still sort of that old agreement, right? GE was picking up grads, West Point grads, Academy grads like crazy, veterans of all types, especially junior military officers, because they were sort of like well trained but not stratified in how they thought. And it was sort of that old way of doing things. And I think that there had been this shift in, between when I got out, you had the dot com bust, the telecom bust, and the real estate bust. And how companies do things is totally different. So what I try, and the advice I give my kids is, there is no longer that agreement. There is a question of, give me loyalty, corporations to employees, but there's not the same loyalty in the other direction. And I think the one good thing about the military is you understood you were valuable, but expendable to some degree, because that's how the military works. And if there wasn't somebody willing, able to take your place, then we have something wrong in the military. I think in corporate America, it kind of used to be, you get there, and if you do your job, you may not rise to the top, but you'll always have a place and you retire and get your pension. Or now that's not the same. And I think when I talk to young veterans or any young person asking for career advice, my advice is that if you think you are going to security with a big corporation, that might be true at the lower levels where you're just sort of a cog in the wheel. But as you move up and are successful, you need to understand that if you were to go away a week later, that company will not miss you. Individuals may. When you think that way, my joke, and it's trite, but the Titanic felt like dry land until it wasn't, right? And I think sometimes people look and instead of saying, well, wait a minute, I can't get in a lifeboat, I'm going to create my own flotation, something where both of them can get on, not the door in the movie. But, but one of those things where it's a matter of saying, well, wait a minute, if I think all my bosses are morons, and I don't think that, but generally, if you've got people look, my bosses are morons, the direction of the company's bad and all that, why do you stay there? If you're saying I can do it better, then do it better.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons that we won't get into here that people stay there. And if you want to find out more and you're listening to this, join my community or sign up for the newsletter because I will point those out very clearly to you. Let's talk about, you mentioned earlier in the conversation that you think that you got out of the Army too soon. And I'm really curious because that's going to play a big factor, I think, in your transition. So let's move to your transition. And what was the decision for you to get out after 5 years as an officer, right?
Yeah.
93 to
So
98.
yeah, I mean, I really made the decision probably in the four and a half year, and it was a weird time for the military, right? So 91, Desert Storm, wall goes down after that, right? Berlin Wall goes down, world totally changes. Um, when I was going through West Point, they were still thinking through the Fulda Gap scenario, right? It was the Soviet Union. Well, all of a sudden, less threats, more asymmetric warfare, that kind of stuff, big drawdown. So you had majors and senior captains who were getting riffed, who were saying things like, I gave my life to this, I to the detriment of my family, and I'm getting riffed. And they said, don't stand. It's terrible for your family. And then you've got the little Greek chorus of recruiters out there saying, hey, it's just like the Army, but you're going to double your salary. And they weren't lying about the salary. The other thing I think is open to question.
It's
But
definitely open to question.
I don't think that the military had the sophistication to look and say, because they offered early outs. So a lot of my classmates got out at 3 and 4 years because the Army didn't need them and they had a longer reserve commitment. I didn't do that. I just didn't. For me, it was I want to do my 5 years. I was stationed in Colorado, so it wasn't like it was being at Alcatraz. But I think that it didn't seem like they were like, why are you getting out? And I had a really interesting realization, and I never realized I got out early until probably 2 years ago. So my daughter's sophomore year at Coast Guard, and admittedly, she'll tell you she was a terrible cadet. And I was like, okay. And I was doing something. I had to find some documents for something, and I somehow found my old OERs that were all like, don't put this guy behind a desk, put him in the field, blah blah blah. And I started reading through, and I'm like, well, why did I leave? I left for money. And that was the 100% wrong thing to do because I bitched as much as anybody going to the field. But when I was out there, that was what you remember. It's not like, hey, that time I was at Garrison.
Oh,
You remember the times you went to the field and had a blast.
I agree.
And we're like, it sucked, and it's loving the suck. And I don't think that I gave enough credit to you're never going to starve if you manage your money right. You're never going to, it's a very decent life. Now, I'm not saying I would have gone career, but I think I look and say there were things about it that way more were in line with who I am. And I wish, again, that decision was what it was. I wish I had made the move to the entrepreneurial side earlier because, again, it's that same thing.
Yeah, for sure. So what did you experience in your transition? Because you mentioned getting out in 98, right? When, this big corporate landscape shift was happening. I was too young to remember it. 98, I would have been, I guess, 13. So I was just entering high school, right? I still didn't even have an inkling that 4 years later I was going to sign the contract to join the Army and go a month after I graduate high school and then serve almost 13 years for combat deployments, all that good stuff. So what were the challenges? I know you hit on the landscape shift a little bit, but the dot-com bubble bursted and, all that, the other stuff that you were talking about, what really changed that really had your transition kind of really be shitty, I guess. You were
It was
expecting.
it was a lot my fault. I think that I was very money driven, which I don't think is bad. I think the money, the way that I saw the end game to getting to the income I wanted to make was the wrong path. So I think what happened was I went for bigger payment. I still, to this day, I regret, there was a West Point grad. He was like an 85 or 86, I think, grad, who was running a company, and the pay wasn't going to be as big. And he really wanted me to work for him. And I was like, no, you know what? I'm going to go for the big pay, blah, blah, blah. I should have gone in that direction, right? I should have listened to the people who were smarter than me. And if I could say one thing has made me a better entrepreneur is finally listening to people who are smarter than me and saying, well, wait a minute. If I don't know the answer to this, like, I should find the answer. The person who had recruited me was like, Doug, this would be a great role for you, blah, blah. And you look and you say, well, but these recruiters are telling me this, and there's more money, and da, 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 right? So I think it was self-inflicted to a degree. And I think that the mistake, that regardless of environment, is to approach it that way, right? Like, I think, again, luckily, while I hate the internet and a lot of things about it, podcasts like yours and things like that now give people, with the democratization of information and niche things like vets and transitioning, now have a place. Those aren't going to be on big media outlets. And I think that's where it's interesting, because you can see a correlation, I believe, between entrepreneurialism and veterans and this. And I think that helps in the transition. Like, just someone going, wow, you want to be an entrepreneur? Go check out Bunker Labs IVMF, or go check out Warrior Rising, or Founders Institute that has a veteran scholarship. Dog Tag Bakery, like, it's this thing where you can start a company and they give you a stipend. There are all these resources. And I think that's where people go wrong. Instead of going, wow, what's available to me? You get that list. Now, what do I want to do? As opposed to saying, what do I want to do? And then jumping into it and then struggling. I just think, and I did it in reverse. Like, I'm going to go for this like super secure thing and all that. And I was miserable, right? I left my first job in under a year, or maybe a little over, because they did not understand how to use veterans. They would be like, hey, go send a fax. And I'm like, it's not beneath me, but you really could use me better. And then, I kind of went through all these different roles to find out where I had to end up. And I wish the transition had been like, hey, if this is what you love, here's where you got to be.
Yeah. And you just touched on it, right? So all those resources, I don't know how the transition was in 98, but I don't think it's probably changed a whole lot even to this day, just on the conversations I've had. And I've talked to a couple of your generation of veterans who said the transition process was shit then. It was shit in 2015 when I got out, and it's still shit today in almost 2025. And you're absolutely right. I was afforded the opportunity by a man I deeply respect to present to a SkillBridge program in March of this year, which validated my whole idea. And how I even came up with this idea, just like you're talking about, is I read a Military Times article or military.com or something like that. I haven't been able to find the article again, but I know for a fact I read it and I was blown away. And I discovered after World War II, 78% of all the small businesses in the United States were owned by veterans. And then you look at Vietnam, and after Vietnam, and this was really mind blowing to me, the numbers fell to somewhere around like 40 something percent. And that made a lot of sense to me, because Vietnam, those guys, I have so much respect for them, not just because, my shitty uncle, who I don't get along with, served over there twice. And, I've met people, but because of what they went through when they came home, getting spit on and, just not being facilitated. And then you look at post 9/11 veterans, and that number is down to 2.3%. So 2.3 or 2.8, some bullshit like that, of all small businesses in America are veteran owned, which told me this is an education problem. At some point in the 40s and 50s, veterans were educated on how to start a business. And that just kept falling off all the way to my generation. And I knew then I had to figure out how to do something about it. So then I get the opportunity to talk about this at an Allegiant Vets SkillBridge presentation. And what I found was over 400 veterans came to listen to me speak. And keep in mind, I didn't have an idea. I didn't have anything that I have now. I just had this notion that this is an education problem. And so basically all I told them was like, hey, you don't have to fit in society's box. You can create something that's yours and be happy. And I can't tell you, probably 50 plus messages came out of that. saying, one, thank you for being authentic and not trying to recruit us into some other job. And thank you for opening a door that we didn't even know existed. That's mind blowing to me. And it shouldn't be, because I had floated around for 8.5 years, not knowing that starting a business was accessible to me, that I was capable of doing that. And so I can't agree with you more on what you're talking about, because I've already done the research, and that's how I got to where I am now.
Yep.
You know?
Well, and you bring up an interesting point about mentors. Like, and it's weird, right? Because you look and you're like, well, in the military, people probably had mentors. They had people who they served with. And I sort of resisted the mentor thing for a long time, and now I'm way better at finding people like. And what's crazy, like once you go past thinking of it a certain way, like why would I have a mentor? I'm not that kind of guy. Then all of a sudden you're in this viewpoint of like, wow, all these people really want to share. Like they really want to help you. And I think, by the way, the Vietnam thing, I would tell you, it's really interesting. Just a PSA on honor flight. I'm involved in one of the honor flight groups, and I'll tell you, anybody out there, these young guys especially, I would say find the honor flight in your area and see if you can be a guardian. We always look for young veterans to be guardians because we get to send a veteran, and a lot of these guys are Vietnam guys. And I think what's missing for the younger generations is that connection to the past in some ways. I think this stuff is a distraction, and I
Big
think that
distraction. Yeah.
this is connection. And you look at like VFWs and American Legions are really suffering, and it's got to be reinvented somehow, because it's a very at risk group. And we talk a lot about the 22 and all that, but it's about purpose, man. I see again and again, it's about purpose. And my West Point class has been decimated relatively by self-harm and suicide. We've got the largest number, I think, of any classes sort of in our range. And you never know why, but I think that there is an aspect of purpose disappearing more and more in our society, and it becoming harder and harder for people who woke up every day putting on a uniform for purpose and looking and saying, geez, no one really does give a shit. I mean, people thank you for your service, but what do they do beyond that? Not much. And I like that guys like you are out there saying we have to lift each other up.
100%, man.
And that's why I've gotten involved in a couple organizations, but like again, IVMF, Bunker Labs, man, things like that. I just hope anybody who's got an idea, because the other thing I'm convinced, my team laughs at me. They're like, "Doug, you're so optimistic. Like X amount of percentage of businesses fail." I'm like, yeah, but that statistic is like the 50% of divorces. I used to work in the divorce space in lending, and people are like, well, 50% of divorces end in divorce. I'm like, or marriages end in divorce. I'm like, that statistic is not true. So then when you look at like businesses failing, well, do they fail because there wasn't a good business plan? Did they validate the business model? Did they do all this? Well, now everybody has the ability to do that for free, right? And so I really hope that that the word gets out, because the other thing that bothers me about what we're talking about is veterans who are waiting for someone to save them.
Yeah, dude. And I can't agree with you more, because doing anything that's in line with your core beliefs, values, and passions, those are the three things that you have to sit with yourself and figure out when you're getting out to make your transition better. But doing anything that lifts you up now is so much more accessible, particularly, and I know this is going to be an unpopular opinion, I'm going to get hate when this comes out about this. AI is here, and if you're not using it every single day in your life, you are wrong. It's as dumb as it's ever going to be.
You. No, I 100% agree with you.
It's as dumb as it's ever going to be. If you're not using it, you are going to get left behind. And I'm telling you, it's the thing that can set you free right now. You have an incredible amount of information at your fingertips, and all you have to do is type in the sentences on a keyboard and figure it out.
It's beyond that. You know what I did yesterday? There was another podcast that wanted me, but they made me fill out a release. And it was very legalese. I cut it, pasted it, put it in ChatGPT and said, what are they really telling me? So, dude, I totally agree with you. But the cool thing about veterans is I think veterans look and they're like, yeah, this is a combat multiplier. This is the shit that, oh,
100%.
I didn't mean to swear. I don't know if I can or can't.
No, absolutely no.
This
This
is the
is
shit that
be
is going,
who you are. Yes,
right. Like you look at it and you're like, aspirationally where infantry is going with like Target battle suits and like if you're not looking at AI as a commercial battle suit, like a business battle suit, you're crazy. And I say it that way because the same way, like if you're Iron Man, right, and you're in a suit and you got your guns and your missiles and your targeting, it does all that. And I agree with you that it's a specious argument on what it replaces because if you're a CEO of even a small company, you're going to have an assistant writing your faxes and you're going to proof it, like, or your letters. It's not like you're writing this. And the person who would be writing it, that's just not a job anymore. Like I look at lending, and this will be, you might get hate for this comment, but I look at like loan officers in the Fannie Freddie space because I did it for 30 years. You could do it better and more accurately with AI because
hundred
yes, there's a
percent.
language model to it, but it's very, very limited because of the regulations that are required in that world, right? So it's a very narrow focus. If that space didn't use AI, they would be wrong.
Well, and I'm here to tell you, since we're having this conversation, this episode, and I think this works perfectly with what you've got going on. This won't be out until April. So if you're listening to this, it's the end of April probably. I have since launched an AI automations offering. I'm going to automate people's businesses because one, it's super lucrative. Two, it is the future. And three, man, it's just something I enjoy a whole lot, setting up automations. And to answer your kind of, just to reflect back what you're saying, a lot of the stuff for this podcast is automated with AI. A lot of it.
That's
You know what I
awesome.
mean?
Yeah.
And nobody would ever know unless I was authentic and told you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and that's what I'm saying is like you have the means at your fingertips right now. You just need to get out of your way. Is AI going to take people's jobs? Yeah, the people who aren't willing to adapt to it, because I'm telling you, it's here to stay. It's not, you can't do anything about it. In fact, if you've been paying attention, last week, OpenAI announced AGI. AGI is a real thing. Like it's happening, right?
Oh
Like
yeah.
whether you want it to or not, and just it's so fascinating to me. I'm so excited about it. I don't take the, the kind of
I've done a 180 on it because I had a friend who I'm part of another startup called Must Wants with, and it's a military real estate platform. Any listeners want to check it out? And I just do some advising, but he got me onto AI early. And the thing with AI for me, the minute the ChatGPT said to me, you're probably a user who wants to pay for it, I was like, yes.
yeah.
The only thing that I figured out, and this is, I'll put it in military terms. It's great to have a red dot, but when the battery dies, you better be able to use irons because ChatGPT was down the other day, and I'm like, wait a minute, I have to write something, and it's not that I'm not writing it. It's just I have a writing partner, and I'm not having a keystroke. So I've actually ideated with thinking, okay, do I get two of them because you want redundancy, right? Like I failed to think through my military thinking of, well, wait a minute, a lot of eggs in my basket here. The hard part though is like the conversations, like could you access them? But I agree with you, and I agree with you that veterans, especially, um, should look at bringing it because it fills all the holes, right? If you can then do your mission without worrying about, hey, am I going to do this or do that? So yeah.
Well, dude, it frees up time. It frees up money because you don't have to pay people to do the things as you grow that you would otherwise be doing. It's inherently less expensive than hiring a real human being. And you control all of the outputs. You don't have that human element that you have to try and get somebody to see your vision and all of that. Once you understand how AI works, right? Like once you learn that a large language model needs some prompting and it needs to know who you are in a very specific way, then it becomes like for me, it doesn't matter when it's down. I've always had the ability to write. I just don't enjoy it. It's not
No,
something
that's
that
it. No, that's my whole thing. So then you look and you're like, like literally, like if you went to the range and you had your gun and I like not in the military And like, would you be like, oh, okay, I'm going to shoot irons, or you'd be like, I mean,
Yeah. Right. Right.
so like I told, but this is where I've been listening to. I'm a big fan of Scott Galloway right now. Like I think he's got some really good messaging, and he has two of them. And he says he like will write in one and edit in the other, or some kind of.
I do
So
the same thing. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I've kind of stayed with Chat GPT alone, just because I'm lazy, I guess, with that. But now I'm going
Well,
to
when you
start.
get into the automations world, you start learning Claude and ChatGPT. They work together to fix each other's errors and
Yeah,
create
Claude's
this
the one he
phenomenal.
uses. Claude's the one he
Yeah,
uses.
I'm telling you, man, this stuff it's the future. We're giving you this information right now. You can listen to this, and you can go play with AI, and you can come up with 1,000,001 ideas to move yourself forward right now. That's the whole point of what we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes.
Well,
I want to
oh, and
go
what's
ahead.
really cool, to end on one thought, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but as we're talking about these accelerators, there's sometimes a daunting view of the deliverables, but it's not like they tell you it's not going to school. Their objective is for you to create an actionable business plan and help you speak to the resources to make it likely most successful. You can use AI to very, very quickly create things. So there's a platform I go on a lot called Hello Skip. It's got like grants and things like that. They literally have AI built into your answering to fill in grants.
Yeah,
Like
it's
it's just
awesome.
you're right. It's where everything is, and I think that there is a lot of bad. Like I'm more worried about stuff like Google and my information being taken there and all that kind of stuff than, and I should pick on Google, like any a platform like that, than AI. But I know you were going to change subject, so I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, man. So you talk about in your transition, it took you some time to align your career passion for building businesses with, kind of your life. So looking back, what tools or resources do you wish that you would have had when you started your transition? I know we just hammered home AI, so that's a pretty clear, obvious one. But what tools do you wish you would have been given from the jump that maybe were kind of held back from you that you had
You
to
know, I
discover?
really wish that the military would be smarter at integrating with the private sector and
Yes.
looking at saying it's not a loss. So I've got a classmate, a guy named Joseph Kopser, who has done this at the level of the academy. He's created an entrepreneurial network that works hand in glove with the Association of Graduates to make sure that like that as people are moving into the private sector, that we're looking and saying these people should be entrepreneurs, because that was what will save America. I wish that there was more in the transition to say, here's recruiters, but here are these other places you can go, maybe while you're on terminal leave, in fact, because if people knew they were out there, they could apply to these accelerators early on and time it with when they get out. And with stuff like AI, like all the resources, the tools will change. The knowledge of how to approach it won't necessarily. I will say, I got my MBA in the early 2000s, and business plan writing and stuff has changed massively since then. But I think if these transitioning veterans had the ability to look and go, okay, I know my transition plan, instead of it being like walking out of prison with your bag and all of a sudden like, hey, I'm free, it should be like, oh, I'm transitioning from this job right into doing this. And sometimes you might have an entrepreneurial endeavor that you could be doing while you're going through an accelerator. Many of them like that. But that's what I wish I'd had. I wish I'd had the guidance. And my story is especially painful because I'm going to say the early 2000s, I was unhappy. I was going to start a business, and there was a contest. There was a company called Maid Brigade, run by a Marine, and they were running a contest for veterans. And if you won, you got like a free franchise and like all this money. And I entered it, and I would have won. And they said, they were like, listen, we've selected you, but we don't want to look stupid. So are you going to take it? And I didn't have the stones at that point. And I'm not saying that from an emasculated perspective, because I think it applies to all genders. I didn't have the grit to say, I'm going to cut free from the easy paycheck. And if
It's
you
the
think
belief in
about it,
yourself. It's the belief in
yes,
yourself.
exactly.
That's what you're missing.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
And if I could have said if I could have looked at like an accelerator and said, hey, you know what? I have this opportunity, but I want to develop it better. That stuff just wasn't there. And I look back and I'm like, wait a minute. I had basically like 100 grand in, a lot of the money they were giving you was in their ecosystem. but I didn't take the jump then. And I think it was less, I blame myself, but I think there was also very much a component of not having people reach out and say, what do you think of this? Am I the right guy for it? What do I need to like? All those questions. And maybe it was me not seeking them the same way, but I just didn't, you don't know to seek what's not out there.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
that's where I wish I'd had more resources to find out what I needed. Because again, the tools change.
Yeah. So moving to your entrepreneurship and innovation, how did you land on innovating and creating Nulu and all the cool stuff that you're doing over there? Because that knife looks badass, to be completely honest.
It's cool. And I'm glad this is coming. We should have inventory in April. So when you post this, they will be able to go to our Shopify site and order stuff. So it was really accidental. Like I did not grow up being a maker, mechanical or anything. A lot of physicality, but the things I built in shop class were atrocious. So you never really think like I could do that. So it wasn't until like my 50s where one, I had a rental property and I got tired of paying to fix stuff, and I started learning how to fix things like a dryer, right? You look and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Especially for military guys, right? Like you'd be in a motor pool turning wrenches and you're like, I can fix this. So that kind of set the seeds. But then I was very fortunate that my wife got me a class with my son to learn how to make knives from a guy named Steve Marney. Awesome guy. He's retired now, but I took that class and really fell in love with making knives. Not that I was ever going to make it a career, but I really liked the process of making. And I think for me, it's very much tied to making useful things, right? You
Utilitarian
can see some
items.
of the
Yeah.
knives that I made behind me. And I like to, I'm not about mass producing. I give them as gifts. I would never sell them, but I got into going like I can make stuff. And I learned really quickly too that it's just having the right tools, right? Like I'm a big fan of Harbor Freight. I buy, if I'm not sure that I need a tool, I'll buy it there first. And actually the Nulu was made all on Harbor Freight, like all my crap in my garage. But I started to then say, well, if I know I can do it, then why don't I? And I had a really bad bout of issues related to my right shoulder. I ended up needing surgery. And by the way, I will say great care from the VA on getting my shoulder fixed. They were amazing. And they sent me to community care. I got it all taken care of, but I couldn't swing a hammer, so I couldn't make a knife, and I couldn't work in the kitchen. I like to cook. And I was kind of out in my shop, and I had a circular saw blade. I keep a lot of stuff out there to play with, and I made the first one out of that, and that just got me going down that road. And it's interesting. This question also touches on advice I would give entrepreneurs: is talk about what you make or what you're doing as much as you can. Know you are the optimism that you believe that your business will be successful, contrary to what the statistics say. The people that you talk to are more likely going to say you're crazy than want to steal your idea.
When I agree with what you're saying about talk about your idea, because if you're truly passionate about it, you won't shut up about it.
No,
You
and
won't. You won't
frankly,
shut up about it, and I experience that on a regular basis. It causes my whole friend group has changed. Because all I want to talk about is building a business. How can I be better? What do I need to do to move myself forward? What's the next step? This, that, and the other with my idea. It's constantly the only thing on my mind, the only thing out of my mouth. It distracts me from all the other shit that's out there that could take my attention because I'm truly passionate about helping veterans transition better. That's it.
but have you also experienced where I was telling my wife this because she may eventually start a business. I said the cool thing is when you hang out with optimistic people, you realize how terrible the rest of it. Like when you hang out with a group of founders, they're like the most optimistic people ever.
Because you're
And
creating your own luck.
about it is great because you hear the objections. And for me, I picked up a great person who's part of my organization. I went and talked to all these CEOs of knife companies and people like, you're crazy. They're going to steal your idea. I said, listen, at the end of the day, we were patent pending. We're still patent pending. But one of the guys took a liking to us. And when he saw the first prototype or the second prototype, he's like, maybe this isn't a great thing. And then my partners and I got together. We did a new prototype. And now this person is part of the organization. So it's definitely get out there, put yourself out there, and you will not find employees, advisors, board members, financing. You will not find that sitting in front of a computer. Go out and talk about it. I even reached out to one of the ex judges on Forge and Fire, and I'm like, whatever, amazing guy. Um, uh, he was hugely helpful. So I think just getting out there and really, like, if it's your passion about it, that's how you got to do it. And decide that nothing is going to stop you. And if you don't believe that way, then you have to either figure out how to get it there, or what's a better business. However, I will say the one piece of advice, and this, you may hear this in Bunker Labs, that one of the speakers gave this advice is, kill your darlings. Like, know when. Like, I've started 3 or 4 other businesses that I loved at the time, and I'm like, oh, I see how that failed now. Like I look back and I'm like, oh yeah. But now that I've had some of the training, I look back and I'm like, if I had done this, right? Like, it's a code switch in your brain as an entrepreneur to, instead of saying, oh, I'm doomed, it's like, well, wait a minute. If I had done it this way, like, I had this prepping business, and it was based kind of on insurance, right? Like, you would take a survey and it would tell you how prepared that you want to be. And then I could fulfill it from the retail perspective. And people were like, wow, this report's great. It did nail me down, but no one would buy anything. So I was like, this is more maybe of a pampered chef kind of thing, where you get guys together and you say, guys, this is your responsibility to take care of your family, right? And like, it would have been a different angle, and it may have survived. So, it's fun though.
Dude, and what really the essence of what you're talking about there is building a network, right? Like, building a network, surrounding yourself.
Your network is your net worth kind of thing.
I didn't understand that until this year, to be honest. I thought it was just another cliche phrase. Your network is your net worth. And I started building a powerful network. And let me tell you, it's not hard to do at all. You can do it in front of a computer if you're willing to meet with people like yourself and me, and you're willing to get out of your own way and just shoot your shot. Just literally reach out to somebody on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, send them a DM, something as stupid as, hey, your content was cool. I think that maybe we could help each other out. Are you willing to have a meeting? Boom. 15 minutes later, you do a meeting with this person, and it informs the next steps that you need to take. You can talk about your idea. You can get advice from them, because likely they're further along than you are, and they're going to give you some advice. Everything that I have gotten, for the most part, has been free. I have not really put any kind of significant money into building anything. I paid for a branding workshop to get some logos and stuff, which really unlocked everything for me. The rest has all been done. And I even, like, people in my community know this. When I started building on LinkedIn, anybody who commented on my stuff or anybody who connected with me, I'd send them a little 1 to 2 minute personalized Loom video, just thanking them for the connection and telling them, like, I don't know what I have to offer you, but if there's any way that you see that I can help you move your stuff forward, let me know. Please reach out to me. I still do that to this day. I don't send the Loom videos because it's kind of out of control, but I still respond to connections when people message me. How can I help you? Let's have a meeting. How can we move each other forward? And it's been the most rewarding thing that I've ever done. That's all it takes. It's really not that hard.
Well, and it's the interesting thing is, the gift to get. I 100% agree. But the interesting thing is on the get, and my one of my classmates wrote a great article about this, is knowing what you want. Like, the big thing is being able to have a concise and very specific idea of what you want. So, and it might be, hey, I just want to talk about your experience in the industry, but then they know what to expect. And the times where people don't respond is when they're like, well, I don't know that I can help this person. That was really transformative too, to be able to reach out and say, I'm specifically doing this. And I want to throw out, like, go a little full circle to your Chat GPT or AI. Is one thing that I've learned is you take conceptually what you think that you have to offer that person, what they have to offer you, but then take the link to their profile and put it in the prompt and say, here's what I think that this would be a connection. Here's their thing. And don't even tell, what do you think? And that's where, if it's an ideation partner instead of a chogi, then you're like in this position of like, okay, wow, now I understand this person a little bit better. But I agree with you. LinkedIn, it's really funny. I go to all these events now. I don't carry business cards because the younger generation are like, what's a business card? They're all using like the little QR code on LinkedIn. I'm like, I
It's so
felt like a
funny.
dinosaur. But
It's so
then
funny
I'll
you
go to
say
like a
that.
Chamber of Commerce meeting and they're like, can I have your card? I'm like, oh, I'm in a different audience. But
Yeah,
yeah, I'm a
I
big
solved
fan of
that
LinkedIn right
problem.
now.
I solved that problem. I got a member in my community. He's like, "Hey man, I need you to make a QR code for your website." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Why?" He's like, "I got these really cool, awesome metal business cards. It's like the best of both worlds. You can hand them out, and then you can take your QR code and you can print it on your T-shirt, and then you're always wearing it. And it's like, boom, done, dude. That's it.
Yeah,
That's the business
yeah.
card now." And little. I think it's so cool. You're right, man. Like they're with AI, like we talked about earlier, there's just the sky's the limit with what you can unlock. And I want people to understand like the world is literally at your fingertips. You just need a little bit of brain power.
But and there's one other thing I got to throw out because as we're talking about LinkedIn, the other resource thing that people have to do, and I'm gonna encapsulate this in Veterans Day, right? You go to these restaurants, man, and there's websites telling you every free meal that you can get on earth. And veterans spend a lot of time not only figuring out where they get the free meal, but plotting how they're going to do it. There are as many free veteran offers out there. LinkedIn Pro or whatever it is, free for a year as a military person. I believe that there's another suite. I can't remember. It might be. I don't think it's Microsoft, but there are all these entrepreneurial tools out there where if you time it right, right? Like if you were to get your business ready to launch and then you're like, okay, year one, I'm going to get all this free stuff. Oh, I use a CRM called Nimble, free for a year for 5 users. And it's as good as any other, but I'm not paying for it. So I think the one thing I wish was more available, and this is where again I almost wish that the transition offices were better at doing this, but telling veterans, hey, you get all these free things to build the infrastructure behind your business. And then and I mean that could be if you look at like Nimble and LinkedIn, all that, you're saving hundreds of dollars a month.
Yep. Yep. Dude, I'm with you, man. Man, tell everybody how they can find you and your Nulu knife and all of that. Reach out to you if they enjoyed this conversation and just want to meet you and figure out how they can collab. We have so much to offer in this space,
100%.
and it's guys like you and I out here doing this thing who are willing to just take our time and have conversations with those in transition and make all of this palatable for you. I just want them to be able to reach out to you and connect with you so that they can do the same thing that you and I have done and just have conversations and move themselves forward.
So I of course nuluknives.com. Right now we're talking in December, but by April it will be a lot more built out because again we're post Kickstarter and had a planned transition into a more dynamic site. So Kickstarter always, LinkedIn, Facebook, any of those. I have a outward, I try and keep my personal stuff personal, but I have a business profile on Facebook. I have my LinkedIn. I have Instagram. I have my own channel. My marketing team is like, we like the madcap stuff, like the little crazier, but so I've got my own channel that's Nulu driven. We also have an official channel. The other thing is, and I'll give you this for the thing is, I've started using Linktree, another really good tool for entrepreneurs, especially if you're creating disparate content. So I'm doing a lot of appearances like this where I want to make sure that there's a lot of clickbacks. So I'm able to put all my appearances in there, all the articles I'm writing, and then all the ways to get a hold of me. So I'll make sure that you have my Linktree because that, again, I always find these tools and I'm like, why didn't I do this sooner? Like I heard about this 6 months ago,
That's
and
right.
I don't do it. But I love that one, and especially for guys in service industries, that would be a great thing where they're able to really show thought leadership. And what I would say is, along the same lines, if any of your veteran or mil spouse listeners or viewers need help, I pay it forward. I'm there. would love to help out in any way I can, because that's what I was given. I think that we're gonna succeed or fail based on the agency that we provide others, in the same way that we succeed in the agency of others who provide help to us. And I'm stealing that directly from the Prof G podcast, because I do think he's nailed a lot of great concepts. But I want to do that in the military community. So any help I can give, I would love to help out.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, I give to you Mr. Douglas Katz from Nulu Knives, and probably a million other things by the time this comes out, because that's the type of dude he is. Please help me achieve my goal by May 9th, 2025, the day I turn 40, of getting this show in front of 1 million veterans. That's a lofty goal, but there's 19 million of you in this country, and all it takes is 2 seconds for you to hit the share button. That being said, please like, share, subscribe, download everything. It helps boost the numbers and achieve that goal. Until next week with another big banger, we'll see you, in the future. Here's to a good 2025. And I can't wait for this to drop and get my hands on a Nulu knife. Thanks again, Doug, for being here, and we'll see everybody next week.
Thanks. And thanks for having me.
That's our show, and I'm truly thankful you've joined us at The Strategic Veteran. If our conversation today sparked curiosity, or if you're ready to elevate your game, I'm here to help. Visit thestrategicveteran.com for exclusive show notes and resources, or to book a coaching session directly with me. Take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and share your review. Your support makes all the difference. For more insights and daily strategies, let's connect on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. Remember, this isn't just a podcast, it's your strategic advantage in action. Until our next rendezvous, stay bold and continue the mission.